The morning sun cast long shadows across the Li family courtyard as servants hurried to make final preparations for what should have been the most joyous day of Li Mei's life. Red silk banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. At 19, Li Mei possessed a beauty that had drawn suitors from across the province. Porcelain skin, eyes like dark pearls, and hair that flowed like liquid silk. She sat before her bronze mirror while her mother's trembling hands arranged the elaborate phoenix hairpins that had been passed down through generations. "You look radiant, my daughter," whispered Lady Li, though worry lines creased her brow. The groom, Zhang Wei, son of a wealthy merchant, had seemed perfect, young, handsome, and from a respectable family. But as the hour of ceremony approached, a commotion arose outside. Zhang Wei's father burst through the doors, his face flushed with shame. "Honorable Li family," he stammered, kowtowing deeply. "My cowardly son has fled in the night. He fears the responsibility of marriage and has joined a merchant caravan heading west." The devastating words echoed through the courtyard like thunder. Li Mei's world shattered in an instant, her carefully constructed future crumbling like autumn leaves. In ancient China, being abandoned at one's wedding was not merely heartbreak. It was social death, bringing shame upon her entire lineage. As news of the scandal spread through the gathered guests like wildfire, Li Mei fought back tears of humiliation. Her father, Li Zhen, a respected court official, stood frozen in shock while relatives whispered behind silk fans. The elaborate wedding feast would now become a feast of shame, and Li Mei's prospects for future marriage had vanished like morning mist. Suddenly, the sound of approaching hoofbeats thundered through the streets. A procession of imperial soldiers in gleaming bronze armor rode into view, their red plumes dancing in the wind. At their head rode General Chen Wei, the legendary Tiger of the Han, whose victories against northern barbarians had made him a hero throughout the empire. Chen Wei was 32, with the bearing of a man who had commanded thousands in battle. His face was carved from granite, marked by a thin scar across his left cheek, a reminder of the campaign that had earned him his reputation. Despite his fearsome appearance, his eyes held depths of honor and compassion that few were privileged to see. He had heard whispers of the scandal while passing through the district and felt compelled by duty to investigate. In the Han Dynasty, the abandonment of a betrothed woman was not merely a personal matter, but an affront to social order itself. As he dismounted his black stallion, the courtyard fell into stunned silence. General Chen Wei surveyed the scene with the tactical eye that had served him well in countless battles. He saw the shame etched on Li Zhen's weathered face, the tears threatening to spill from Li Mei's eyes, and the cruel whispers of guests who had come to celebrate but now reveled in scandal. "I am General Chen Wei," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of imperial command. "I have heard of the dishonor brought upon this house." His gaze fell upon Li Mei, still resplendent in her wedding robes despite her anguish. Something stirred within his battle-hardened heart. Perhaps it was her dignity in the face of humiliation, or the way she held her head high despite her pain. "If the Lady Li Mei will have me," he declared, causing gasps to ripple through the crowd, "I offer myself as her husband. Let this day be remembered not for abandonment, but for honor restored." The proposal was unprecedented. A general of Chen Wei's stature could have chosen any woman in the empire, yet here he stood, offering his hand to save a stranger's reputation. Li Zhen fell to his knees in gratitude, overwhelmed by such unexpected generosity. Li Mei looked into the general's dark eyes, seeing not pity but genuine respect. Though her heart still ached from Wei's betrayal, she recognized the nobility of this stranger's gesture. I accept your honorable proposal, General," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the murmur of amazed guests. What followed was the most extraordinary wedding ceremony the district had ever witnessed. The same decorations meant for Jiang Wei now served to honor a true hero of the empire. Chen Wei's soldiers formed an honor guard, their armor gleaming in the afternoon sun as they stood at attention around the ceremonial pavilion. Li Mei found herself walking beside this imposing stranger toward the altar, where moments before she had expected to pledge her life to another. The general's presence was overwhelming. He moved with the controlled power of a warrior, yet his hand was gentle as he helped her navigate the ceremonial steps. As they knelt before the ancestral tablets and exchanged the traditional 3 cups of wine, Li Mei stole glances at her unexpected husband. His profile was strong and noble, and she noticed how carefully he performed each ritual, showing deep respect for traditions that bound them together. When he spoke the ancient vows, his voice was steady and sincere, as if he truly meant each word despite their unusual circumstances. The ceremony concluded with the traditional red silk cord being tied around their wrists, symbolizing their eternal bond. As the guests cheered, now genuinely celebrating rather than gossiping, Chen Wei turned to his new bride. "Lady Chen," he said softly, using her new title, "I pledge to honor and protect you for all my days." Li Mei bowed gracefully, her heart filled with cautious hope. 3 days later, Li Mei found herself in a luxurious palanquin, traveling toward the imperial capital where Chen Wei maintained his residence. The journey would take 2 weeks, winding through mountain passes and fertile valleys that showcased the empire's vast beauty. Her new husband rode alongside her escort, occasionally checking on her comfort, but maintaining the respectful distance appropriate for their arranged union. During rest stops at wayside inns, Li Mei observed her husband's interactions with his men. They clearly revered him, not just for his military prowess, but for his fairness and concern for their welfare. She watched him personally tend to a soldier's injured horse and share his own rations with a young recruit who had lost his pack to river bandits. "Your husband is a man of great honor," observed old Wang, the senior servant Chen Wei had assigned to care for her. "In 10 years of service, I have never seen him break his word or abandon a comrade." These words gave Li Mei comfort, though she wondered what place she would occupy in this warrior's life. One evening, as they camped beside a mountain stream, Chen Wei approached her pavilion. "Lady Chen, may I speak with you?" His formality was both respectful and distant. They walked along the water's edge, the silence broken only by the gentle babbling of the creek. "I want you to know," he said finally, "that our marriage need not be conventional, if such is your wish. I acted to preserve your honor, not to claim a reluctant wife." Dakam, the Chen family estate in the capital, was grander than anything Li Mei had imagined. Built during the reign of Emperor Wu, it sprawled across several courtyards, each more beautiful than the last. Ancient pine trees provided shade for winding pathways, while lotus ponds reflected the curved rooflines of traditional pavilions. The architecture spoke of both wealth and taste, accumulated through generations of faithful imperial service. Chen Wei's mother, the Dowager Lady Chen, was a formidable woman in her 60s, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. She had initially been outraged by her son's impulsive marriage, but found herself impressed by Li Mei's grace and dignity. "You conduct yourself well, child," she admitted after observing her new daughter-in-law for several days. "Perhaps my son showed wisdom despite his haste." The household staff, initially curious about their master's sudden bride, quickly grew to respect Li Mei's kindness and intelligence. She took time to learn their names and showed genuine concern for their families. The head steward, Master Liu, was particularly pleased when she demonstrated knowledge of household management and began making subtle improvements to daily routines. But Li Mei's greatest challenge came from her husband himself. Chen Wei was unfailingly polite, but maintained emotional distance, treating her more like an honored guest than a wife. Their conversations were formal, centered on household matters or current events. Each night, he would escort her to her chambers, bow respectfully, and retire to his own quarters. Li Mei found herself longing for something deeper than mere courtesy. As weeks passed in the capital, Li Mei began to understand the complex world she had entered. The Han court was a labyrinth of political intrigue where loyalty and betrayal walked hand in hand. Chen Wei's position as a successful general made him both respected and envied, particularly by those who had never proven themselves in battle. During a court banquet, Li Mei witnessed the subtle machinations that surrounded her husband. Ambitious courtiers approached with false smiles, seeking his support for their schemes. She watched Chen Wei navigate these treacherous waters with diplomatic skill, never committing to alliances that might compromise his integrity. "Your husband has many enemies," confided Lady Wang, wife of another general, during a quiet moment between courses. "His honesty makes corrupt officials nervous, and his success breeds jealousy among lesser men. Be watchful, dear sister, for they may seek to strike at him through you." That night, Li Mei found herself troubled by these warnings. As she walked in her private garden, she discovered Chen Wei practicing sword forms in the moonlight. His movements were fluid and deadly, each technique perfected through years of training and battle. She watched, mesmerized, as he executed a complex sequence that ended with his blade stopping mere inches from an invisible opponent's throat. "You cannot sleep either?" he asked, having sensed her presence despite her attempt at stealth. For the first time since their marriage, his tone was less formal, touched with genuine concern rather than mere politeness. The conversation in the moonlit garden marked a turning point in their relationship. Chen Wei began to share fragments of his life. The weight of command, the burden of making decisions that affected thousands of lives, and the loneliness of leadership. Li Mei listened with growing understanding, offering insights that surprised him with their wisdom. "When I was young," she told him one evening as they walked beside the lotus pond, "my father taught me that true strength comes not from wielding power, but from knowing when not to use it." Her words resonated with the general, who had learned similar lessons on blood-soaked battlefields. Their conversations grew longer and more intimate. Chen Wei spoke of his campaigns against the northern tribes, the friends he had lost to war, and his dreams of a peaceful empire where children could grow up without fear. Li Mei shared her own hopes, for a family, for a purpose beyond mere social convention, and for a love that went beyond duty and arrangement. Gradually, the formal barriers between them began to crumble. Chen Wei started joining Li Mei for her morning tea, and she began visiting his study in the evenings, helping him with correspondence and offering opinions on matters of strategy. The household staff noticed the change, smiling to see their master's stern features soften when his wife entered the room. But their growing closeness did not go unnoticed by those who watched from the shadows, waiting for opportunities to strike at the general they both feared and resented. The attack came on a night when autumn rain drummed against the estate's tile roofs. Li Mei was in her chambers, reading poetry by lamplight, when she heard the soft scrape of tile overhead. Her father had taught her to be observant, and something in the sound triggered alarm. Moving silently to the window, she saw black-clad figures creeping across the courtyard toward Chen Wei's quarters. Assassins had breached the estate's defenses, their target clearly the general, who slept unaware of approaching death. Without hesitation, Li Mei grabbed the bronze mirror from her dressing table and angled it to catch the lamp's light, flashing a signal toward the guard towers. The warning came just in time. Chen Wei, a warrior's instincts honed by years of campaign life, awakened at the first unusual sound. His sword was in his hand before his feet touched the floor, and he met the first assassin at his chamber door. Steel rang against steel as more black-clad figures poured into the courtyard. Li Mei watched in terror and admiration as her husband fought with lethal grace. But the assassins were skilled professionals, and soon he was outnumbered. Making a decision that would have shocked her former self, Li Mei armed herself with a ceremonial dagger and slipped from her chambers to help. Her intervention proved decisive. While Chen Wei battled 3 opponents, a 4th crept behind him, blade raised for a killing stroke. Li Mei's warning cry saved his life, though the assassin's blade found her shoulder instead. The pain was blazing, but she had bought precious seconds for the estate guards to arrive. As Li Mei recovered from her wound, tended by the estate's best physicians, Chen Wei rarely left her side. The attack had shattered the last barriers between them. She had risked her life for his, and he could no longer pretend their marriage was merely one of convenience. "Why?" he asked, as she lay pale but determined in her bed. "You could have hidden, stayed safe. Why risk yourself for me?" Li Mei looked into his eyes and saw genuine bewilderment, as if the concept of someone caring enough to endanger themselves for him was foreign. "Because," she said simply, "you are my husband. Not just by law or arrangement, but by choice. When I saw you in danger, my heart made the decision before my mind could interfere." Her honesty broke something loose in Chen Wei's carefully guarded soul. For the first time since childhood, tears threatened his composure. The investigation into the assassination attempt revealed the conspiracy's scope. Several high-ranking court officials, threatened by Chen Wei's influence and integrity, had hired the killers. The evidence was damning, but prosecuting such powerful men would require the emperor's direct intervention. As Li Mei healed, Chen Wei found himself changed. The woman he had married out of honor had become precious to him, her courage and loyalty winning his guarded heart. He began courting his own wife, bringing her flowers from the garden, sharing meals in intimate settings, and speaking of a future that included not just duty, but genuine affection. The emperor, upon learning of the assassination attempt against one of his most faithful generals, was furious. Chen Wei and Li Mei were summoned to court, where she would testify about what she had witnessed. The palace throne room was magnificent and intimidating, its gilded columns supporting a ceiling painted with dragons and phoenixes. Emperor Wu was in his 50s, with the bearing of a man who had ruled effectively for decades. His eyes were sharp as he listened to Li Mei's testimony, delivered with calm precision despite the nervous tension that filled the vast hall. She described the attack, her husband's courage, and the evidence that pointed toward the conspiracy. The accused officials, stripped of their court finery and kneeling in chains, attempted to deny their involvement. But Li Mei's testimony, combined with captured assassins' confessions, painted a clear picture of their guilt. The emperor's verdict was swift and merciless: death for treason, with their families stripped of rank and property. "General Chen," the emperor declared after justice was pronounced, "your service to the empire is exemplary, but your wife's courage is equally admirable. Lady Chen, approach the throne." Li Mei knelt before the Son of Heaven, her heart pounding as he continued. "We bestow upon you the title of Lady of Perpetual Grace and grant your husband the additional lands of the Songshan Valley as reward for your mutual loyalty." The honor was unprecedented for someone of Li Mei's humble origins, but the emperor had recognized something special in the woman who would risk her life for duty and love combined. With the conspirators dead and their position at court stronger than ever, Chen Wei and Li Mei returned to their estate to find spring transforming the gardens. Cherry blossoms painted the courtyards in pink and white, while new servants arrived to help manage the expanded household that came with their imperial rewards. Li Mei threw herself into her new responsibilities, overseeing the renovation of guest quarters and establishing schools for the children of their servants. Her organizational skills and natural compassion made her beloved throughout their domains, while Chen Wei watched with growing pride as his wife exceeded every expectation. Their marriage, begun in crisis and built through trials, had blossomed into genuine love. Chen Wei courted Li Mei with the dedication he had once reserved for military campaigns, learning her preferences and dreams with careful attention. In quiet moments, they would sit together in the Lotus Pavilion, planning improvements to their estates and discussing the books they shared. The change in Chen Wei was remarkable to all who knew him. The stern general who had rarely smiled now laughed at his wife's gentle teasing, and servants noted how his harsh edges softened in her presence. Li Mei had found her purpose not just as a wife, but as a partner in building something meaningful. As autumn arrived, Li Mei realized she was carrying their first child. The news filled Chen Wei with joy, tempered by protective concern, remembering how close he had come to losing her in the assassination attempt. Their happiness was complete, but both understood that greater challenges lay ahead. Word arrived that the northern barbarian tribes were massing for another invasion, threatening the empire's frontier settlements. The emperor commanded Chen Wei to lead a massive campaign to crush this threat permanently, a mission that would require months in the field and expose him to significant danger. Li Mei was now visibly pregnant, and the thought of leaving her behind was agony for Chen Wei. But duty demanded his leadership, and she understood the weight of his responsibilities. "Go," she urged him, her hand resting on their unborn child. "Protect the empire so our baby can grow up in peace. I will be here when you return." The farewell was heartbreaking. Chen Wei knelt before his wife, placing his hands gently on her swollen belly as he made promises to their child he might never see born. "If I fall in battle," he said, "know that you gave my life meaning beyond mere duty. You taught me that honor includes love, not just service." Li Mei managed the estate with skill during his absence, maintaining correspondence with other military wives and organizing support for the campaign. News from the frontier was sporadic and often alarming. The barbarians were fiercer than expected, and the fighting was brutal even by the standards of experienced soldiers. As her pregnancy progressed, Li Mei found strength in managing the estate's affairs and caring for the soldiers' families. Her reputation for wisdom and compassion spread throughout the province, and many sought her counsel on matters great and small. She was becoming the woman she had never imagined she could be. The battle that would end the northern threat took place on the frozen plains beyond the Great Wall. Chen Wei led his forces with tactical brilliance, using the barbarians' overconfidence against them in a series of maneuvers that destroyed their army and killed their war chief. The victory was complete and decisive, ensuring peace on the frontier for years to come. But triumph came at a cost. Chen Wei was severely wounded in the final assault, an enemy spear finding a gap in his armor and nearly costing him his life. For weeks, he lay unconscious in the campaign's medical tents, while his subordinates managed the army's return to imperial territory. Li Mei, now in the final weeks of pregnancy, received fragmentary reports of her husband's condition. The uncertainty was torturous, but she maintained her composure and continued her duties, knowing that panic would serve no one. When news finally arrived that Chen Wei would survive but needed months to recover, her relief was overwhelming. Their son was born on a snowy winter morning, as if he had waited for word of his father's victory before entering the world. Li Mei named him Chen Yong, meaning brave and perpetual, and sent word to the returning army that the general's heir had arrived safely. Chen Wei's homecoming was everything Li Mei had dreamed. Though still bearing the marks of his wounds, he was alive and whole, and his first sight of their son reduced him to tears of pure joy. The man who had commanded thousands in battle was utterly conquered by a tiny baby's grip on his finger. As they sat together in their garden, watching their son sleep while spring flowers bloomed around them, Li Mei reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From abandonment and shame to love and triumph, their story had become legend throughout the province, proof that sometimes fate knows better than human plans, and that true love can bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances.